This is He Said, Ella Dijo.
All right.
Hello.
It's been a fun episode today.
Bienvenidos a He Said, Ella Dijo.
Yeah.
We have an incredible guest today. She's a friend. She's a dear colleague. She is
Very talented actress.
Mega talented. So I apologize, Lana, that hopefully when you listen to this podcast, you're going to not listen to any of this intro and you're going to start listening from when I say, anyways, we have a very special guest because this has nothing to do with the interview and the incredible conversation we're about to have with the very talented Lana Parrilla.
From Once Upon a Time, Why Women Kill.
Spin City, 100,000 things because she's done it all. Stay tuned. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you both?
We're good.
Doing
How
good,
are you,
doing good.
Eric? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling all right. I'm feeling good.
We're super excited to have you, Lana. We've had la suerte que nos hemos conocido mucho, hemos compartido in different places, and we have a lot of mutual friends. I'm a huge fan of your work. And then Eric as well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I want to hear, I'd be excited to jump right in even to what was it like going into Why Women Kill as that was like your next big move, right? After Once Upon a Time for so many years.
That's right. That's right. It's always that thing when you play such a larger than life character for 7 years.
Yeah.
7 years.
Which is a dream, by the way, for like an actor, like 7 years on a show.
I know.
But you're like 7 years too.
Well, and everyone, like, when you first start acting, everyone knows, like, you're just like, oh, I want a big hit show. And it's going to go for like, 10 years. And then you get there and you're like, my God, we're still telling these stories. But luckily, before we get to Why Women Kill, luckily with Once Upon a Time, my character went through so many changes that I had the luxury of really showing so many versions of her.
Yeah.
There were like 12 different versions of the character that I was able to show, which was incredible. And that often doesn't happen in television.
It rarely happens. That was a big blessing right there because it keeps it fresh as an actor. You feel like you're doing something new every season or so. And that's incredible.
Yeah. And you're always looking for like, okay, how do I make this different? And what haven't I shown before? Mm-hmm. I was constantly searching for things like that with the character. And it took a lot of like research and inspiration and watching different actors do different performances like Gary Oldman from The Professional or even, Heath Ledger from The Dark Knight and Glenn Close from Fatal Attraction because I played a serial killer on some level.
Yeah.
So keeping that fresh and also making her somewhat redeemable and showing a heart and finding the humanity in her and the vulnerability in her. And it was truly, I would say, probably the most diverse character of my career to date. So I was very blessed. But with that said, going into Why Women Kill, looking at that going, okay, how do I, the title alone, everyone's thinking, okay, Lana's going to be murdering people again, right? She's playing a villain yet again. And sort of breaking that idea on some level for the audience, but also for myself, like playing a character for 7 years, that she's in your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I say DNA, I'm like, oh my God, I sound like the Queen. Do I sound like but Rita Castillo was such a different character, and she turned out to not be the killer that everyone expected her to be. So I had such a joy. Everyone was so much fun, and as you know, Rosalind, you've worked with Mark Cherry before,
yes.
And it was such an honor after all these years of being a fan to have the opportunity to work with him.
Yeah, Mark is so good at what he does. He understands his comedy, and when he writes, he's so specific. And I'm sure you experience that. I remember that when I first worked with him doing Devious Mates, Eva, our mutual friend, she'll tell me like, just do what you're told when it comes to if he gives you a note. Just pay attention because he knows exactly where he wants the audience to laugh. And
he writes with your acting in mind or your process in mind, right? Like he kind of writes for the cadence of it.
I think he writes for for his
Well, no. He thinks he knows.
interpretation.
He thinks he knows your. I'm saying, but he thinks your process would be in the character.
No, he writes for his process and then wants you to be able to understand what his process is and do it the way he would perform it. I mean, and I'm not. I don't mean anything bad by that. It's just like he's so specific. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you will go in and blow him away with whatever interpretation you have of what he wrote. But my experience was he is so specific about every single character and the way he wants it done and the way he sees it, that you need to try to give
match
it.
that vision.
Exactly. You have to try to match the vision, which is delicious, to be able to understand, well, I don't think that should be the punchline, but if it is, because he tells you it is, then you have to explore it, and trust that the Twitter feed the next day, once people see the episode, they're going to be talking about that line that he told you they were going to laugh at. You know what I mean? So once you build that trust, it's incredible.
Well, and it's interesting because I'd never done this sort of dark comedy before in my career. I started in sitcom 100 years ago, and that was really the last time I did comedy. So everything after that was, 1 hour dramas, etc. I think the Queen had a sass to her, so I had like the snarky remarks.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it lived in a line, which was kind of easy to play, and it's obvious.
Mm-hmm.
With Mark Terry, like you say, he is so specific and so detailed, and his joke, you have to know how to land the joke.
Yes.
And it's rhythmic.
Yes.
There is a rhythm. It's a dance. It's like you have to sort of train your ear to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to deliver to the vision that he is expecting out of you. And there are times when, and he's just so gentle, at least that was my experience with his notes. It was very collaborative, but it was also like, it was gentle. It wasn't like, that's not how you say the line.
Of course, yeah.
He would find ways to tell you like, this is kind of how it should sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of like, I want you to hit this word or whatever. And I was very open to every suggestion and never, ever took it the wrong way, because I knew that I was still new at telling stories in this sort of genre.
Yeah.
And so that was also part of the intrigue when I got the job. I was so excited because I was like, oh, I get to exercise this
Mm-hmm.
part of my instrument that never gets to play roles like this.
Yeah.
And I get to like do more comedy. I come from comedy. My aunt's a very, very hilarious comedic actress. She's been in the industry she would kill me if I said how many years, but let's just say 50 years
Wow.
plus.
Wow.
And I grew up in a very funny household, making family films with my grandparents and mostly on my mother's side. My father did funny things. My father was a clown in his own way, Puerto Rican, born in Sanchez.
Oh my God. I was born in Santurce.
Yes.
Really? You know what? I didn't know for whatever reason, Lana, I thought for the longest time that your father was Cuban. And then before the podcast, I was reading about you and I was like, oh my God, Lana's dad is Puerto Rican. I didn't
You're
know
Puerto
that.
Rican Italian, right?
And
I'm
Sicilian.
Puerto Rican Sicilian.
Claro,
Sicilian.
Sicilian. Sicilian is Italian? No. Yeah.
Different.
No?
It is
It
actually
is and isn't,
Okay.
right? It's
interesting. In Sicily, they all, and in Italy, it's like, oh no, we're all Italian, but you're from the South. And at one point it was really frowned upon, but it's almost like the evolution happened there and not here.
Okay.
It's like in Italy and Sicily, it's like, we're all Italian. We're Italian. We're Italian. We're just in Sicily. It's like a region of Italy,
Okay.
but it really is an island.
Oh, wow.
And so my family's from Sicily, both sides of my mother's, parents. And my father was born in Santurce, moved to the States when he was 8 years old, and became a ball player. So he played ball and he played
Yes.
pro ball and he played with Roberto Clemente in
Oh
Puerto
my
Rico.
God. Oh, wow.
And he played in Mexico as well. And then little by little, he worked his way up to becoming a professional baseball player for a short period in his career, but he ended up playing for the Phillies.
Let me ask
Very
you something.
cool.
How did your parents meet in the US?
So this is funny. They met during spring training in Florida.
Okay.
okay.
And my mother was traveling with my grandmother, her mother. And they were at a shop, like a pizza restaurant. And it was like it was like a Domino's kind of version or Pizza Hut kind of back then in the 60s. And all the ball players were there. And they saw my mom. My mom had this beautiful long hair, like pastor bum, very, beautiful Sicilian Italian woman. And they started betting amongst themselves, like who was going to ask her out. And while they were like conversing amongst themselves, my father just stood up and walked over to her. He was like, I don't have time for these games.
That's awesome.
And he went up to her and literally asked her out right in front of her mother. And it turned out that my grandmother's sister lived in a house behind where my father grew up.
Oh my
So
God.
they literally were like around the block from each other.
And
but
didn't know
never
each other.
met.
That's crazy.
Wow.
And 27 years later, they met when they were 27.
Are you an only child or do you have siblings?
I have an older sister.
Okay. And she's not an actress?
She's not an actress. No, she works for Southwest Airlines. She's been there forever.
Okay.
She's not an artist. In some way, she's a dancer.
Okay.
Like you. She loved to dance. It was her dream. It was hard for her to pursue. And so she didn't end up having the same opportunities as you or I. And but I can tell you, at any dance party, she's the first one on the floor. And she was a great choreographer.
Wow.
And she still dances to this day. She has two
great.
kids. I have two nephews, Sammy, named after my father, and Bryce, 15 and 18-year-olds.
Wow.
And they're great. They're
That's
good
great.
boys.
When did you know, Lana, that this was for you? Like, was there a specific age or moment or experience that you're like, I'm going to pursue acting. I'm going to move to LA. This is what I want to do.
Yes. So there were certain periods. Like I said, we had family movies when we were kids. So I used to perform commercials all the time for my family at 3. I was definitely influenced by my aunts because I thought she was so glamorous and beautiful. And I was going to see theater at such a young age. I was always, especially growing up in Brooklyn, I was always we were going to the theater constantly, mostly like, A Christmas Carol and seeing like the holiday shows. We didn't grow up with money. So it was like we saved like, a couple days out of the year to go see the theater for special occasions. But we saw a lot of, off Broadway and smaller plays here and there. And then when I was about 7, I used to practice crying all the time in front of the mirror. And my mom thought something was wrong. And I said, I'm practicing. And then at 12, I started like reading monologues, and I wanted to audition for LaGuardia High in Manhattan, which was the school that Fame was based on. But we lived far from the city in Brooklyn, and a 12-year-old getting on a train at 7 a.m. was just not an option. So I had to go to my local school, and I started studying theater there and doing plays in high school. I eventually moved here. I finished my last year of high school here. My parents split up. My mom came here. I followed her, did some theater here, and then started like studying acting professionally at 19.
Okay.
I made that choice then that this was what I was going to do. And that was it.
That's so great.
So you started at 19, and I mean, you've been working a lot. I mean, throughout your career, you've jumped from many different shows. You've been on a ton of things. But that journey, I'm sure, like all of us, it's just had the ebb and flow of the ups and downs of this business, climbing up, climbing. You're like, why am I not going to the next thing? Is when you want to go to the next thing, and it's kind of like out of your control. It's not. It's in the cards for you, so to speak. What's going to line up? Knowing it's what you always wanted to do. Was it easier to sort of dig deep and be like, I'm going to keep pursuing this, I'm not going to get frustrated? Or like a lot of us, you have those moments where you're like, wow, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be?
My frustration started later in my career. I think just as we get older, we get tired. It's like, oh my God, when you put your destiny in the hands of others, it gets scary.
Yes.
And when you're in your 40s, late 30s, it's like, oh gosh, this is, did I make the right choice here? I think when you're in your 20s, you're much more resilient.
Yes. you're fearless, you're fearless. You have nothing to prove. It's like, it's funny because somebody was asking me today if I enjoy the auditioning process, like how is that like? And I'm like, I hate it. I'd rather put needles in my eyes, and it's the older I get, the more of an issue I have with it. But when I started in my 20s and until probably my mid 30s, I used to be fine because I used it as I'm exercising. I'm doing what I love. I can't wait to go in and show them. And I think it's delicious because I'm working in my craft and it's my muscle, But then after a while of having to prove yourself over and over again, and you get called in to do things that you've done so many times before and they still doubt you. There's a moment that you just go, like you said, I'm tired.
It's just tired.
I'm severely tired.
Was that essentially like it was for you? Like you said, the older you got, you're just like, oh
my God. Yeah. I think that's also why I started producing. I'm kind of new at producing, but it really prompted me to like want to take my own destiny into my hands and create opportunities for myself because, much like our good friend Eva has done with her career.
Yes.
And she's been a huge inspiration for me, just sort of watching her trajectory over the years and going, God, she has such, tenacity and
she's a doer. Eva's a doer. Eva is like, I'm going to do, She's just going to make it happen. And that is the attitude that you need to have. I'm sure she gets tired too. We all get tired. Yeah. But right now it's like, okay, I'm tired, but I create other opportunities for myself. Like you, Rosalind, with your singing and the dancing, you have these other outlets that kind of keep you going. And this podcast, for example, is another one. I started this small little merch line that's been fun for me to create and sort of have something else that I can put my energy and creativity into when I'm super frustrated with like my acting career. I'm like, I've had 8 shows. I carried a show for 7 years. I'm like, I'm still having to prove myself. They still have to audition. Yes.
I'm like,
yeah, you know what's crazy? I remember like when I was like in my 30s, I would say, you know what, when I have kids, I will die if I'm 45 years old and I still have to do this and do that. It's like, no way. Once I have kids, it's over. And here I am. I have a 10-year-old. I have one that's going to turn 10. One is going to turn 4. I am 48 years old. And I'm blessed. I'm on a show. I've been so lucky my entire life. But here I am. If there's a show that or a movie that I really, really want, I have to fight for it. Like if I was 25 years old.
I was talking to my reps about this and I said, do I really have to put myself on tape for this right now? And they're like, well, especially today with, everyone's self-taping, if we don't do that, they're going to watch 20 self-tapes and just go, oh, let's just give it to this person, as opposed to like offering it to so-and-so, or even taking a meeting to talk to them via Zoom. Like people don't want to do it anymore. Yeah. You're not going in those rooms. And so everything is a guessing game. Like, okay, I'm auditioning for this part. There's no director, no casting director to talk to. I hope I'm in the right ballpark.
Yeah.
You have to start getting really clever and creative with your audition tapes. And now I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it this way. And then I'm going to try something totally different to show them variety.
Wow.
And then send them all in and go, okay, this is what I got.
This is what I got.
Don't have you to help me.
Exactly.
Well, it's funny. I don't think our listeners even understand like the way it used to be. And you go into an audition, you would never show in with props. Really, you would never. It was almost like the least hard you tried, the better chance you had. I mean, you want to be good, but you don't want to you seem too anxious for the role or too excited, right? But now with the self-tape, it's become such an art. And I talked to so many of the younger, like even on my show, like the younger cast, and they're like, oh, we go all in on self-tapes. I mean, we have the lighting setups. We have sometimes multiple angles. Like they're in wardrobe.
Multiple angles?
Sometimes they're using props. They'll edit things together. They'll cut back and forth. They'll do props. They'll do all kinds of stuff that you just never did when you went into a room. Because you can't be walking around with a bag of props or things, They go all out and they really put together a tape. And it's kind of true. You kind of have to find a way to stand out now because you can't stand out with your own presence.
It's so funny. I just had this conversation a couple of days ago and I was talking to this acting coach and I said, have you seen Belle? and they said, no, Val Kilmer's
Yeah, it's
we
great.
saw it.
documentary.
Incredible.
And I said, if you watch it, his audition tapes were like full on
Yes.
platoon, fatigues with guns and hiding behind rocks.
Yes.
Like, oh my God. Am I doing this right? Like,
It's true. It's true.
I saw it, and then the next day I did a guest star for this show called Home Economics that is on, what is it, ABC, right? With Topher Grace and Carla Souza, this incredible Mexican actress. And I was so affected, and I kept texting Eric saying, I cannot stop thinking about this Val documentary. And I showed up the next day. I'm talking to the makeup people. I talked to I couldn't shut up because I was so overwhelmed about the journey and the freaking story and what he's going through and his work ethic and how crazy people thought he was at some point in his life because he was so intense.
How dedicated his craft. He was like, I didn't know his history growing up and Juilliard and his background. I didn't know all that.
It's bananas. It was bananas.
We all knew the guy from The Doors. We all knew the
even
Top
today
Gun.
with his health concerns, like he's still, he has a gallery, he has a studio where he works out of, and I've been there once before. There was a gallery opening, and I got to meet him, and I got to see what he does there. And he works with all these kids, and he has this theater group, and it's like it never ends. My aunt is the same way. My aunt is constantly studying, constantly educating herself.
Good for her.
I can't say her age because she would kill me, but like it's many years of that dedication to your craft. And that is something I try to instill in a lot of our youth when I often get questions like, do you have any advice for me? And I always tell the story about how I always wanted to act. And I was out to lunch with my aunt. I was 12 years old. And this agent came up to her and said, oh my God, your daughter's so beautiful. Take my card. I'd love to, have a discussion about possibly working with her.
Yeah.
And I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, it's finally happening. 12 years old, it's finally happening. But I was like, it's happening. And we went to the bathroom and she ripped up the business card and threw it away. And I was like, what
why?
Are you doing? And she goes, this isn't an industry for children. Wow. If you want to do this, learn your craft and go after it with everything you have. She goes, because it's the kind of industry that you have to love what you do so much that you don't want to do anything else because it's that hard. Yeah. You're constantly being rejected. You're constantly being told no. You're constantly being compared to someone who's taller, prettier, skinnier, younger. And you're just like, oh my God. And if you don't love this wholeheartedly, you're going to sink. Yeah. So it's like, I was devastated and angry at her, but I never forgot that. And what it did is it set me out to learn my craft and study with some of the best teachers. I didn't go to Juilliard. I didn't have those opportunities. Like I said, we didn't have any money and times were harder for me in my teen years. I lost my dad when I was 16 during my junior year, and it really hurt my grades.
Wow.
And I lost him tragically. So it really kind of messed me up for a while. But at 19, I thought, okay, I didn't get to go to the schools that I wanted to go to. However, I'm going to create a curriculum. I'm going to go out there and find the teachers that did teach at these schools and let them be my mentors. And I had 4 of them for years. 2 of them, one just passed away, and it was very heartbreaking for me. This year, on February 16th, he was my voice coach of 24 years. Wow. Really taught me not singing, but like how to use your voice and where it is in your body. And I started teaching that eventually here and there to people. And one of my other mentors, Joselyn Jones, who's known me since I was 19, who's an incredible, not only teacher, mentor, but like director. She's phenomenal. So I started really kind of handpicking my mentors and teachers, and I just stuck with them, learned my craft. And when I was ready is when I went out there. But I studied for a good solid 4 years before I really put myself out there.
So that was really valuable. Yeah, valuable advice from your And can you imagine the journey, what it would have been if she would have said, beautiful, thank you, let's call. You know, it would have been such a different...
Or if you just didn't listen to her. If you didn't listen to her and you're like, I got this.
I got
but
this,
you followed great instruction, and that's important for people to understand. I get asked the same thing. And it's like when you try to give people your path or your journey, it's different for everyone. You can't really give one set of rules, but that I think is a blanket statement. Study your craft, know your craft, you know, otherwise you're swimming with sharks and it's not going to work.
Pretty much.
Well, otherwise you're up against the people who went to Juilliard, the people who went to Yale, you know, or the people who went to RADA. Like there's a lot of competition. And I guess when we were younger, like they didn't really instill that as much. Like, you know, there were a lot of actors that never had that training and just kind of went out there. It was something they wanted to do. But I think, especially now, like, I feel, and when I look at people's credits now, it's not always the case. I've seen a lot of, you know, and I think Emma Stone, I don't think she even went to like any,
I don't think so. Yeah.
Professional schools or anything like that. But those are far and few in between. Like you don't find those like people that just have that natural talent. And there are people that are these big dreamers that want this, but they weren't born with the innate gift. And so they have to learn it. And really you can learn it. Although,
you know what, I think that the climate is changing a little bit now because, you know, social media is such a gigantic universe, for better or worse, you know, and there's all these young kids and all these what they call influencers and all these girls, just beautiful or not beautiful, that have these millions of followers that out of nowhere want to act and they just want to become somebody doing something. And it's really disturbing. And the studio gives them a shot. It's just very disturbing and sad how, you know, studios, that their mandate is, you know, when casting directors, and I don't know if this is for everybody. I don't want it to be always said that I do these blanket statements, whatever you call it. But you know what? Nowadays, sometimes you're up for things and the studios want to know your social media numbers. And it's important to them to know how many followers you have. And it's like, when did this happen? Like, how is it possible that I'm competing with somebody that has never acted before? I've been doing this for 25 years. Comiéndome la mierda muchos años. You know what I mean? It's like, are you joking? You know, it's really interesting. But I do believe cream always rises to the top. Is that the correct saying? Yeah. And they get exposed somehow, you know, and the ones that do the work and the ones that have the studying behind them, you know, either you have incredible natural gifting, you're gifted and you're able to swim like you're incredible, like Emma Stone, people that have never trained, and even Jennifer Lawrence, I believe, they just have the ability and they're able to tap into whatever it is that they do with their essence to make things work. But that's not everybody. That's people that God goes, I'm going to give that to you.
That's right. And those people actually end up learning on the job.
Yes.
You know, they end up learning that way. But there's this sort of feeling and desire, like, I want to grow in those actors. So you can see in Emma Stone that she wants to continue to be better. I think a lot of these like influencers or, you know, people that get a shot at something, it's like, yes, you got lucky, but can you sustain?
That's what I'm saying. Yes.
100%.
And that, you know, and the people that really work on their craft, there's an opportunity to really sustain a career. You know, it's not so short-lived, and you're not just like, you know, overnight success, and then you're forgotten.
And they disappear. Exactly. They disappear.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting. I once learned that the Chinese set a 25-year career plan for themselves, and they give themselves 25 years to reach their sort of, you know, that level of success.
Interesting.
Wow.
And I tell this to a lot of young artists who come here and they're like, oh, I've been here for 3 years and I can't get a break.
3 years.
You know, I'm like, okay, but if you think of it this way,
exactly,
if this is something you truly love, give yourself 25 years.
Exactly.
You know?
Take your turn, you know, take a little, the turn, you know.
I was really lucky to meet Morgan Freeman on $1 Million Baby. And I spoke to him for 3 hours. And I was talking to him about his voice because I was training voice. And I was just so intrigued about how his career unfolded and how he got to where he's at. He said, I've been acting since I was 8 years old. And I said, what? And he said, I didn't make it until I was 50.
Wow.
Crazy.
He said, I did some small things, whatever, but I had to give up, and I ended up becoming a cabbie again. He goes, I started driving taxis in New York City, and then I went in and I auditioned for driving Miss Daisy, and it changed everything.
And it changed his life.
And it's like, wow. And amazing that was the role that really kind of set him off, because he was a cab driver.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, and he was in his 40s.
Yes.
When he was, so, you know, he's like, there's so many times I quit and I went back to go do whatever just to kind of, you know, keep a roof over his head.
Yeah.
But he said, it took me all these years. I didn't make it till I was 50.
That's crazy.
And it's like, or you think of, you know, gosh, what's her name? Helen Mirren, you know, and when she really sort of had this breakout role, it was
how old was she?
I think she was in her 50s as well.
Wow.
There's still hope. There's still hope.
And that's the thing. It's like, you know, I've often had fantasies about being the marine biologist that would have been the other career. But, crazy. You know, I was like, God, to live on the ocean would have actually been really nice. And probably
I know, right?
calm and healing.
Pretty much.
And not as expensive to keep up with the whole appearance of everything. But,
no. It's a job. It's a job within a job. Anyways, thank you so much, Lana. This was fantastic. You're really so awesome. Wonderful, and it's
oh my
interesting.
God, likewise, this is so fun.
The whole time that you were talking, when you explained that your voice work, you know, for many years, you had a voice coach like teaching you about the instrument. 10 minutes before you said that, I was listening to you, and even though I know your work really well, this is the first time that I see you like a platform like this doing a podcast, and I was thinking her voice is so clear and precise, and the speech is so beautiful. I swear to you, I was thinking that, and then you said you did.
It's all that voice work.
It's all the voice work. I was like, I want to talk like Lana.
Well, I can always teach you some tricks.
Please, I need it. Anyways, thank you.
With pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mama.
For having me, you guys.
Bye-bye. Of course.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that was fun.
A lot. Yeah. You know, I swear to you, Eric, the entire time she was speaking, I was like, Lana has an incredible speaking voice, which I think is so important. You know how many times we've seen TV shows or whatever, and I tell you, I don't like that person's voice. I don't believe anything because I have such an issue with voices. And her voice is amazing.
Well, I'm sure in her role as the queen, like her voice was so commanding, so powerful.
It's commanding.
There's so many things she had to do. And navigate
beautiful.
in that role over the seasons, so it pays off. You know,
Yeah.
hard work pays off. It's plain and simple.
And you know what's awesome? Like people within the industry, when they think about Lana Parrilla, they think serious actress. Like they think she's an actor. You know, it's just beautiful. You know.
Yeah, and how interesting she in comedy was always her foundation.
Yes.
Well, that was great.
Yes.
Glad we got to do that.
I know.
Lana, thank you.
Thank you, Lana.
And all of you wanting to learn more about acting, this is the podcast.
We're going to transition into the masterclass with Ross and Eric.
Love you.
Bye. Love you.
Subscribe to He Said, Ella Dijo on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your podcasts.